Tony Sanders, professor of real estate finance at George Mason University and the former head of mortgage bond research at Deutsche Bank. Tony is in Washington to testify at the very same housing finance hearing. Tony, I want you to give us your recipe for how to fix the housing finance system. Go ahead.
Well, my fix to the housing finance system will be different than the one Secretary Geithner is going to put forth eventually. I think what he wants to do is merge Fannie and Freddie into one entity and make them a new government agency, bringing them on balance sheet. My recommendation is to move the opposite direction, and that's to slim down Fannie and Freddie greatly, take away their funding advantage through the guarantees, and actually move towards privatization. Because otherwise, right now, I mean, Fannie, Freddie, and the FHA have 95% of the residential mortgage market, and that's not a good thing.
A lot of people would agree with you, Tony, and I want to bring up for a moment a graphic that helps illustrate the point that you just made. 94, 95, 96%. That's the share of the U.S. housing market that the government has. It has risen from 42% back in 2006. Again, this is according to figures from Inside Mortgage Finance. When you say privatize Fannie and Freddie, how do we go about doing that? How do we get private capital into a housing finance system that is so overwhelmingly supported by the taxpayer?
Well, the devil's in the details, there's no doubt about it. What I also recommend is something that Congressman Garrett from New Jersey has proposed, and that's a covered bond structure. That's a new type of securitization model where the banks actually make residential loans, but keep them on their balance sheet. So there'll be no guarantees from the government. The banks will then issue bonds, and the bonds will serve or collect the money from the assets on the bank's balance sheet. Dedicated to those bonds.
Tony, let me jump in for a moment because I understand a little bit about covered bonds. I have a feeling that most people don't. They're going to listen to what you just said and think to themselves, that sounds just like a securitization. Explain to us the difference between a covered bond and a typical residential mortgage-backed security.
Oh, there's a big difference between the two, although they sound similar. With a securitization, a bank would originate a loan, sell it into the secondary market to, say, let's say, Goldman Sachs, who would then bundle them up and sell them off to that Norwegian fisherman that was in the PowerPoint circulation. In this case, what happens is if Bank of America, say, originates a note, they actually keep it on their books so they can service it themselves and handle it in case something goes wrong. So we don't have that same problem we're having right now. They then issue a bond. The bondholders receive the cash flows from Bank of America for those dedicated assets. So again, the bank is still in charge of the loan. It's just that the cash flows are received by another party. The brilliance of this is it takes the bank off the hook for enormous capital posting if they just left the note on their books exposed. And it's better than securitization because, once again, the bank has a definite vested interest in maintaining the note and making sure it's serviced properly, which is one of the concerns that happened during the securitization crisis.
Tony, very briefly, we only have about 45 seconds. Why not do it the way that, say, I understand Canada does it? Why not have the banks do the lending and keep all the loans on portfolio without necessarily dispersing the risk to private investors?
Well, we can definitely do the Canadian model. I don't think, first of all, Americans are ready for the down payment size. But secondly, the problem with our banks right now is that our top 10 banks are very thinly capitalized after the meltdown, and they just don't have the capital to lend. So the covered bond automatically gives them capital to lend because, again, they kind of line up buyers of the bonds so they could actually securitize the deal and sell it. Right now, though, the banks just don't have eventually they will, but right now they just don't have the capital to turn around and do the Canadian model that you suggest.
Tony, thank you very much.